Okay, this is the critical lap. This is the critical lap. Confirm.
Leave me alone. I know what to do.
Welcome to the Critical Lap. I'm Ruben.
I'm Daniel.
Hey, Daniel, how you doing?
Doing great, man. How you been?
Man, I'm fantastic. I'm ready to talk about Formula One.
Man.
I'm ready to watch some Formula One.
I know. I was about to say that we're getting closer and closer. There's great stuff to see in the meantime. A lot of hype, but yeah, I'm ready to see some actual numbers getting posted and some competition.
Yeah. I mean, on the plus side for myself and a lot of America right now, we are right in the middle of the playoffs. We just watched the national championship in college football. Basketball's running, but for football fans, time is running out. You know, you have literally 3 more games left. And then if you're not a Formula One fan, that's a great reason to join because you get action almost immediately after the Super Bowl. So,
yeah. And if you're tired of seeing the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, which I know it's not decided yet, but if you're one of those people, then you'll fit right in Formula One because there's there's a lot of multi-year winners as well in the sport. And I had to take a little dig at the Chiefs, just given the jersey you're wearing.
Everybody is. Why not you?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's Chiefs are taking a lot of flack, and I think it's totally warranted. We've kind of entered our villain phase, right? I say we. They have entered their villain phase. But
you can say we. You can be one of those fans. Who else is left in the playoffs, though?
We've established I'm a bandwagoner. Let's see, Bills and Chiefs, and then Washington Eagles. Washington, and the Eagles. So
cool. Well, I wouldn't call you a bandwagon fan of the Chiefs. I mean,
no. I've been a fan long enough. I went through the dark days. Some dark days, some average days.
Yeah.
No, but you're right. It is funny how, like, I probably would not call myself a Verstappen fan because it's just too easy right now.
Yeah.
Right. I would say the reserve drivers here at the house, the young reserve drivers, they are 100% Verstappen fans. Like, who's your favorite driver? Verstappen. Why? Because he's the best.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Numbers don't lie.
Numbers don't lie.
Current numbers, right? So.
And not to go too far down the football rabbit hole, but there was a recent game, if you were watching the Chiefs, where Patrick Mahomes took what could be considered a little bit of a flop, a little bit of a dive, and people were frustrated. And I thought, it strikes me as Verstappen, if you're not going for every little gap in the rules, every little opportunity to maximize those points, then are you really interested in winning?
Right. So are you saying he did one of those quarterback things where he didn't just keep plowing ahead? He did the little slide into third base kind of thing once he got the first down? Or are you talking about, sounds like he may have intentionally hurt the outcome?
No, you know what he did? He didn't get the call. So for all the frustrated fans out there, he didn't get the call, but he ran toward the sideline and slowed down at the last second so that they bumped him. And when they bumped him, he threw up his hands.
Oh.
So he quite literally pulled a Verstappen. He threw it down the inside.
Yeah.
He threw it down the inside and then went, hey, he hit me. He ran me off.
Yeah.
And he didn't get the call. So, but Anyway, enough about him and more about Verstappen. What do you want to talk about? Recent Verstappen news. I don't know if you saw this. Apparently, he's going. This is a hot off the press here. Verstappen is going to Aston Martin for $1 billion. Have you heard?
$1 billion.
$1 billion.
This is a rumor that has been published in a. I don't know how to qualify the newspaper, but it's the Daily Mail who I think first published it. So I don't know if it's a really trustworthy new rumor or like what their threshold for, publishing that kind of insider information. But $1 billion, right? That's
that's
billion with a B.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot of money. I had no idea how much truth was to that. I mean, right now there's a lot of hot news around Aston Martin and, obviously Adrian Newey moving over there. And is it their year? Are they going to have, we talked about that a little bit recently. Are they going to have a big year? So I didn't know how much of that was just the Aston Martin hype and Lawrence Stroll throwing his billions around. So.
Yeah. Billionaires and their projects, they've already, I don't know anything about Lawrence Stroll, but they've already made their $1 billion or their multiple $1 billion. So they're decent at getting something across the finish line. So, if Elon Musk's any example of, what you can do when you're performing at that level and you've got the sort of the acumen,
Right.
You know, Elon Musk can sort of revamp space travel or space whatever, you know,
Yeah. If
service
not him,
providing.
then who?
Exactly.
Right.
Right. If Lawrence Stroll, dog with a bone and $1 billion in his pocket, can't make it happen, who can come at it and take a, you know, what used to be Racing Point or Force India and turn it into a contender.
Right. Right.
Um,
Which would be kind of cool to see, to be honest. Aston Martin's a great brand. I am kind of confused. Maybe I'm not the only one confused. So they can just buy Verstappen for millions and millions of dollars, but they have was it Red Bull? Red Bull that got in trouble for too many catering costs like 2-3 years ago.
yeah. So that's a good way to like split the hair, because I don't know if the spend cap applies to like deals that the driver might get,
Right.
you know, on the side. And it sounds like this, you know, $1 billion package is more, you know, these are the sponsors we can bring to the table. And it sounds like the conversations are, hey, you know, I don't know who it is, Coca-Cola, Walmart, whoever the sponsors are. If we bring Verstappen to the team, will you commit this much money? And it's always like, well, upon that condition, or I mean, I'm speaking in certainty
Right.
here,
Right.
but the idea is that the response from the sponsors and the way that they came up with this big figure, which is paid out over 5 years, so it's like 200 million a year for 5
Sure.
years. Their response was like, sure, if those are the conditions, then yes,
Right.
that's the amount of spend we're willing to have.
That makes sense. But that doesn't eat into your catering budget then. If you bring over
I mean, I hope not. I mean, don't let Jeremy Clarkson find out that there's a change in the catering.
That's all he's there for, right? Clarkson for the catering. Yeah.
Well, I'm referencing his departure from the BBC back in the day when
they
Top
didn't get a
Gear,
steak.
yeah, when Top Gear became bottom gear, whatever you want to call its decline,
Right.
when Jeremy and Hammond and May departed, it was over. I think it was over catering. I think that's
I think it was over a steak. Right? He was
yeah.
promised a steak and got some sandwiches or something.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that would be a full circle situation if Verstappen gets bad catering and throws a fit and gets thrown out of the Formula One paddock for punching someone. Something tells me that a Formula One driver of Verstappen's quality could punch another competitor or a staff member and still not lose his seat. He'd probably have to just make some apologies.
Yeah, he'd pay a fine probably.
Yeah.
Maybe a settlement maybe an NDA would be signed in a settlement. Who knows?
Right. Well, and since we've covered football, we might as well cover the BBC. That's what they should have done to Clarkson. If they just charged the guy, they would have made a lot of money and they still would have had their cash cow. But,
right.
You know, you got to draw a line somewhere. But speaking of Clarkson, so Aston Martin's got a big update. But I don't know if you saw this, Daniel. We were talking about LinkedIn the other day. Did you see that Lewis Hamilton got a new job?
Wait, is he switching teams?
He's switching teams.
Oh,
I guess it's been in the works for. I guess it's been in the works for a while. He's switching teams. I can't remember which one it is now, but
it's like a no-name team, right? It's like nobody cares about this team.
Hasn't won anything in a long time.
Yeah.
But he posted a bunch of photos this week. I don't know if you saw that. The big news: Hamilton is in the Scuderia.
He's in it.
He's there.
He's in the stable. Is he the horse or is the car the horse? Is he the thoroughbred?
I think the cars are the horses.
Okay, so no? Yeah, I think that's right.
I mean, that would make sense.
So he's in the building with the cars.
He is. Yeah, that's right.
Got it.
He has seen the horses in the Scuderia. He's there. And ironically, I don't know if you saw his first picture. We just talked about him wearing red for his last Mercedes picture, and his first picture for Mercedes or for Ferrari, he's wearing all black.
Yeah,
which I thought was hilarious.
Which I don't know if this is true or not, but you see some of the other pictures with like Schumacher and that kind of thing. It might have been somewhat of a tradition to be a little bit more formal on your first day there. Obviously, Lewis is going to take it to a complete new level and be, you know, super high fashion about it. But hey, that's the F1 world.
Right.
So yeah.
You have to hope that we've hit a point where instead of, you know, Hamilton showing up with sort of like the baggy ripped jeans and like the really cool cutoff, you know, t-shirts, he starts showing up to the paddock like only in double-breasted Italian-made suits and fine leather shoes. I would be all right with that for an entire year. Everyone else showing up in quarter zips, and Hamilton's walking in with the coat over his shoulder, looking looking like he's going down the runway.
That takes me back over to like NFL, NBA. You see the guys walking from like the bus into the locker room, and some of them are in like, designer hoodie or designer sweatsuit, tracksuit, whatever. But some of them are like straight up, dressed way up. I just wonder what that would what impact that would have on fashion or on like, a younger generation of Formula One fans. Like, would we be able to bring like, what's the fedora? I mean, not that it's not gone, but like the fedora with a suit is very much like classic formal attire, formal business attire. So I wonder what kind of things Lewis could be influential in bringing back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it reminds me of, was it in 2019, 18, 19, 20? Somewhere around there, Mercedes had their, I could look this up. Mercedes had their, I don't know, call it 50 or 70 anniversary, and they all dressed up, right? It was like Total Wolf, and everyone else showed up at the paddock with like vests and flat caps and everything from the 1920s. Might have been their 100th anniversary. I don't know. But they all showed up dressed up, like they were going to Peaky Blinders conference or something.
Yeah, but didn't Lewis kind of make a statement there too? Wasn't he sort of like he followed the theme, but he was like way more interesting than everybody else in his choices.
I'm sure. Yeah.
That'll be a great photo to look up after this.
Right.
So there's all the hype. Almost said Lando. Lewis is at a new team. And for those of you who don't know, the Tifosi is what is used to refer to the Ferrari fan base. That's like, the sort of the lifers, the people with the tattoo on their chest.
Mafia.
Yeah. They are very excited for him to be in the Scuderia. So
yeah, I mean, it's exciting. So I get the hype. I will say, having watched all the news this week, I can't remember when his first day was. I think it was Monday. It feels like it was a month ago, because it seems like every hour there's another photo of him. There's another exciting update. It's like Lewis Hamilton got his first Ferrari pen. He's met the engineers. He's walked around and like seen everybody. Like, it's a little bit overblown, in my opinion, in the sense that like, okay, cool. Like, let's get to the actual driving and see if you're any good at this. This part is all just, I don't know.
Well, I was gonna say, how do you feel about it, Ruben? But I guess you answered my question before I could ask it.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. The first, if you haven't seen the photo, you definitely look up the photo of him wearing the big double-breasted black suit and overcoat. That was great. I thought that was really cool. It was very Instagrammable. And
well,
then
speaking of which, let me interject here.
Yeah,
it's either that photo or one of the other photos that was posted is currently the most liked Formula One photo on social media ever. It's
really,
yeah, it is the number one liked photo in Formula One media.
So maybe you can't have too many. I mean, so what I'm hearing from you is people have been waiting for this for a long time. This is really exciting. I've heard the comparisons made between Lewis joining and Schumacher joining Ferrari in 95 or whenever it was. So I get that there is a lot here. This goes back to what I think you said a couple of episodes ago, where you just said, this is a huge deal, right? Like the most successful Formula One driver joining the most successful Formula One team. It's the match made in heaven when it comes to marketing and photos for Instagram.
And hey, what's good for any one given team in terms of like getting attention and growing, whether it's hype or popularity or whatever, I think it's good for the sport. So I'm sure people who've heard the name Formula One, who've heard the name Lewis Hamilton or whatever, they probably saw this come up on their feed somewhere, saw it in the news, and it probably like brought them a little bit closer to understanding something about the sport, and might have even like piqued their interest more than just whatever else is going on at any given time, right? So I think it's good. I mean, I'll sympathize with you a little bit. It does just feel like hype for the sake of hype.
Right.
But again, the point that I've made before is you combine those two things, and there's sort of a 1 + 1 = 3 outcome in my mind. So
yeah. Well, and if you're the marketing team, you're fired if you don't do this. If you don't go all out, this is your chance. This is as good as it's going to get for the next decade.
Yeah. Ferrari not bringing in Hamilton would probably be like Blockbuster not buying Netflix. So, I mean, that's I mean, I would throw it up in that category of like, oh, you had the chance to do that, and you just didn't want to make history. You didn't want to revolutionize the sport or whatever.
Well, or looking at the way poor Danny Rick left F1, where they didn't even acknowledge it was his last race.
Yeah,
and he's just, everybody knows he's crying in the last interview. This is the exact opposite side of that, but you can't underdo that, right? If you, especially with as much time as Hamilton gave them to prep for this.
True. Which is actually, when you say that, you think, oh, maybe the reason it was announced at that weird time was to let the hype just build and build and build.
Right.
But yeah, back to the marketing department. A few figures here. Basically, you get Lewis Hamilton on social media. You get him next to a Ferrari being the most liked post ever in the history of Formula One social media. And then you think about all the logos that are on his outfit, which I don't think that's the photo that was so well liked or so highly liked. Right. But there's some figures online that I found in this article where it talks about just the actual like single post value for the brands that have their logos on his driver's uniform. Okay. You've got Puma at $40,000, Shell $52,000, HP at $62,000, IBM at $48,000. I mean, this is like the return on investment that these guys get when they pay to have their brand on the car, on the uniform. And one post can bring you tens of thousands of dollars in equivalent returns. And I don't know how those numbers are calculated, right? But
that's where you want to be,
right? So I don't have a good comparison or frame of reference, but it seems like this thing was the right business decision. In addition to being, it was the right business decision, and we were going to see the post one way or the other, because once you get that type of investment, you have to surface every photo. Right.
And here he goes. He's walking around the parking lot. He's
clicking the pen, like you said.
Look at him shaking hands with every single engineer.
Right.
So real question though. How much does this matter? I mean, I know you're not a driver. It's not something maybe, or an engineer, so we don't have firsthand experience with that. How much of an impact does this make? Obviously, there is the show value, the marketing value of it. Meeting the engineers. We talked a little bit about back when we did our McLaren deep dive. Zach Brown coming in and doing some major changes to the culture and leadership there, and whether it was only him or not, how much that changes. I guess I'm wondering. Is it really the value of bringing Hamilton in to kind of hype your team up, to push you to that next level, to scrap your way past McLaren? Is Hamilton getting a lot out of this test run other than, just a warm welcome? I know he did like 10 laps or something like that, trying a limited number of laps and maybe a few more as the week went on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think you have to capitalize early, capitalize often. Right. There's going to be a lot more content in the news cycle the closer we get to day one of the 2025 season. Ferrari is going to kind of miss the chance to stand out by unveiling their livery for 2025. So to me, yeah, this is a way to be like, okay, like we have to be in this, everybody's at the same place at the same time, reveal or launch event. Let's grab a little bit of that attention for ourselves in a singular channel. That's the way I see it. The numbers that kind of speak for themselves, but yeah, I think, I don't know, it's a big deal. It's a big deal that Lewis is going to Hamilton. We talked about that a lot, but it's also a big deal for him to be there, for the
Lewis
first
is
time.
going to Ferrari.
Did I say Lewis is going to Hamilton?
You did say Lewis is going to Hamilton, which is a great show, but I think not what you meant. Lewis is going to Ferrari.
Lewis is going to Ferrari. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you got to capitalize on that.
But yeah, so now he's there. Now it's in the ether. It's recorded and he's it's all real for everybody. Finally, I think that also drives a little bit of accountability, right? Like,
sure, okay,
the leadership have to answer to this big decision that they've made. The team has to get behind it. The engineers, everybody has to. All right, it's real, it's happening.
Right.
It's not like, well, 3 races in, well, the car didn't perform. Like, no one's going to be like, yeah, but Leclerc just deserves all these things, or Leclerc has, there's all these things that he's earned. Like, no, Lewis has earned his spot or his status and title.
Yeah.
So like, that car has to perform. That team has to, be on point every single race weekend.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's got to be a lot to that. People always talk about how important it is to have meaningful work and that your day to day matters. If you're an engineer, it's probably been a lifetime dream to engineer a car for Hamilton, or to engineer a car for Verstappen or any of these really great drivers. You've already got Leclerc, who I think everyone knows is sort of a champion in waiting or a champion caliber driver.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the closest shot you're going to have in terms of we've got two of the best drivers in the field. And their car was performing at championship performance levels, at least at the end of last year.
Yeah.
So that's exciting to see. And in terms of the practice lap, it's old machinery. So he's driving an old, I think, 2-year-old car, at least 2-year-old car, for a few laps around. I did read that he's never driven in Formula One in a vehicle. Sorry, every vehicle he's driven in Formula One has been powered by a Mercedes power unit. So McLaren was Mercedes power unit, and was when he drove for them, and then obviously he drove for Mercedes. And they claimed that makes a difference, that the engines perform, even if it's minutely differently, that the driver is going to experience those minute differences, and so it matters getting him exposure to
more reps as often as possible. Which there are limits to how much he can test, or
It's like 1,000 kilometers or something like that.
1,000 kilometers within 4 days, no more than 60 or no fewer than 60 days before a race. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Mercedes has always been dominant in that power side of the equation, as opposed to like Red Bull's aero or Ferrari's, top end speed and, balance with everything. So I agree. That's actually a really good point. After that much time, surely there's some like habits to break or some relearning to do.
Right. Well, and I mean, I here we are in our non-Formula One driving tendencies. If you've been driving a Honda Civic for 10 years, 12, 15 years, however long he's been driving Formula One, and you're going to switch tomorrow to driving a Ford Focus, it doesn't hurt to drive a 2-year-old Ford Focus and figure out maybe not where all the buttons are or all the switches are, but how does it perform? How does it feel? What are the differences? If he can drive the old one well, one would assume he could drive the new one well.
Yeah.
Or figure it out just as easily as, if not just as easily as Leclerc, pretty close.
Sure. And you make a good point about the buttons too. You may not think that's super significant, but I mean, Hamilton has a very specific design that he likes in his steering wheel. His clutch paddle is, I think, different from most drivers' clutch paddle, and it's specific to him. So, and I'm sure any team can accommodate that. But then, how do you connect all the buttons and things that is the preference on the interface for the driver with all the things that have to make those buttons make work in the car, right?
Right.
So yeah, for sure, that's a great way to think about it.
I mean, we assume they can figure it all out, but it's harder than it sounds, I'm guessing. Is that why Hamilton holds the top of his steering yoke when he's taken off, or whatever they call it?
It's been a minute since I've looked into it, but you're right. Yeah, that's a good call out. I think there's like a larger, maybe like longer travel paddle for his clutch versus maybe a more assisted, I'm not sure, but yeah.
Well, I assume, I feel like the drivers, if not superstitious, they are very process oriented. I'm going to listen to the same music before I start my race. So my guess would be you could move his clutch paddle and he's still going to put his hand on top because that's how he starts races. So yeah, maybe a little bit of exposure for Lewis getting into the car. That makes a difference, kind of warming up to the team and getting going. And everyone else is doing some practice runs right now with their cars too. It's just not getting nearly the attention. I think Sainz had some runs in the Williams and is getting ready to do some more. Coming up pretty soon. And I think the goal was to get Ocon some exposure to the new Haas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they specifically called out, I think they're doing testing. I can't remember where they were testing. Was it at Silverstone? But anyway, they were testing with Haas, and specifically their priority was getting Ocon in there, knowing that Behrman's already had some exposure last year.
Yeah.
So nice. Well, that's exciting. I mean, it is exciting. I don't want to downplay the fact it's exciting to see Hamilton finally take that spot. It is nice to get away from the what if, and all the fake CGI or AI generated images of him you've actually got him dressed up now. And speaking of old Clarkson, Jeremy Clarkson poking fun a little bit with his own suit and overcoat, I think in front of his actual Scuderia. So
and that was a fantastic post. There's no such thing, in my opinion, as bad Jeremy Clarkson content. He kind of has success with whatever he's doing, as evidenced by the Clarkson's Farm most recent venture or whatever. But yeah, he's what a great sense of humor, and I'm assuming he and Hamilton, I know Hamilton's been on Top Gear before, so I'm sure they've got somewhat of a relationship, or at least know of each other and how each other has that communication. And Clarkson's on the grid a lot. I don't know how many races he was at last year, but you see him popping up in the media and in those, grid walk interviews and that kind of thing. So
right. Yeah. No, I think so. He's definitely a fan. I think he's called out a couple times that he technically supports Alpine, I think, because they are his local, quote unquote, local team.
Yeah.
I think they practice closest to him.
And he owns a beer brand as well. There may be some sponsorship there between his beer brand and Alpine. There's at least been some content where the two are together.
Hawkstone Lager. Yeah. Not a sponsor. Could be a sponsor. Call us.
Could be a Critical Lap sponsor. Oh, you mean we don't know? We don't know if you're an Alpine sponsor or not, but you could definitely be a Critical Lap sponsor.
That's right. And if by this point we do have Hawkstone as a sponsor, we're grateful for their sponsorship. Hey, one other thing I wanted to chat through was the rule changes for 2025. Specifically, I was seeing a lot about in this past week the DRS. Well, not the DRS changes. The rear wing flexibility gap changes, but realistically designed to kind of combat the loophole that McLaren took advantage of with the quote unquote mini DRS.
The mini DRS
here a little bit.
Yeah.
But that leads to a bunch of other rule changes, which I know you've been digging into. So
first on the DRS piece, which I don't know if we've mentioned it before, but yeah, the mini DRS, for anybody who doesn't know, basically McLaren designed their rear wing to essentially not hold up to the forces of the top end speed in a straight. So if you can just imagine like this thing hanging on for dear life at the back of the car, well, it would open up just ever so slightly based on the forces that were being applied to it. So it would reduce the drag, almost having a small DRS effect on the car, even when DRS was not in effect. So yeah, that rule change specifically, they basically very strictly specified how big the opening can be when DRS is activated, and then very strictly specified how big it can be when it's closed or deactivated, instead of it being less defined and allowing McLaren to exploit that loophole.
So I think going back just a little bit, DRS, most people familiar with drag reduction system, that's the wing flap effectively folding flat and letting more air through on the straights in specific designated DRS areas. As I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, the rules for DRS or the rules for wing flexibility in general state that I'm oversimplifying, that the top of the wing it cannot flex or bend or move. It's got to sort of return to the same spot. But to your point, what McLaren kind of figured out was the bottom edge of that wing, where it meets the effectively the next layer of wing down, that bottom edge, sort of the gap between those two wings, that's where, to your point, they designed it to not hold up to the air pressure. So it literally starts to peel upward.
Yeah.
Which I found fascinating. It was literally, hey, it's not flexing, it's it's peeling upward.
Yeah, exactly. But basically, if you're going 60 miles an hour down the road and you hang your head out the window, your lips are going to do all kind of stuff. So, that's basically the car was meant to just be to not hold up to that force.
Right. I'm surprised it didn't whistle when it went down the straight. You probably can't hear it.
Right.
But it's like
it very well
P-51 Mustang diving or whatever.
Yeah. It's crazy what happens in those situations with all that speed. And for those of you who don't know, DRS is, we talked about it in episodes past. You got to be less than a second behind the car in front of you to have the chance to even activate DRS and use it. But it's a tool that allows for more overtaking, essentially.
Yeah. And the minute you introduce that, I feel like it has created a situation where teams are trying to take advantage of it. Because once you start bending and moving pieces of the car, how they return back to their normal shape, or how they bend or move, or that entire process.
Yeah, and I don't think any of this is new to the sport, but the most recent
Right.
one before the McLaren was, I think the Alpine had a wing, maybe even the Red Bull on the back, that would essentially just sort of fold down because it was too weak at certain speeds. It was too weak to like maintain its position on the car, so it would fold down and therefore reduce the overall drag coefficient, profile moving in the direction that the car was going in the straight, on the straights and at high speed. So that the flexibility of the rear wing has been a point of contention before. They just didn't specify enough to for McLaren not to exploit that. Which until this rule change, McLaren should have been able to just keep that feature on their car, but they did sort of unwind the effectiveness of it because they were trying to make sure that they didn't get any kind of sanctioning or whatever from the FIA.
Well, but I did read that McLaren was really open about it. I mean, they stated very clearly how it functioned, and the FIA was aware of it. And but do you remember halfway through last season they put, speaking of sponsorships, they put Target symbols all on the back of the wings? Did you see that
at McLaren?
Nah, on every car.
Oh, on every. Oh, yeah, yeah. So
they had these little. They were actual little targets that were designed to be, I think, readable by a computer. To track the actual flexibility of the rear wing. But they were little red targets, and the whole time I thought, man, there's a targeted marketing executive right now who was about to pay a lot of dollars to have their symbol on a car, and they've scrapped that deal.
Yeah, and when you think about the tens of thousands of dollars one post with Hamilton can get, I mean, not that it's Hamilton, not that it's Ferrari, but like the value really does exist there. And if you can make one person or 1% of people think of your brand with stuff like that, that's really good, free publicity for Target.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's as they do their tech talk. If you zoom in right here, you can see the wing flexing. Target. Expect more.
Yeah, expect more, pay less. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
That was
so McLaren basically was open about it because they weren't cheating.
Right.
That's not cheating. That's just
it's a loophole.
It's exactly,
quite literally.
Exactly. It is an edge that they found that no one else had found.
A literal loophole in the rear wing. So that was one. That was one. I'm sorry, it was a terrible joke. So that was one change they made. Updates the DRS rules in 2025.
Yeah, and
there's obviously a whole package of rule changes coming for 2026.
Yeah,
like entire design changes. But
yeah.
Did you go through the rest of the rule changes?
So I didn't get super granular. There's 8 that are, to me, the bigger ones. Minimum weight increase for drivers and therefore the car. A cooling system requirement, which
for the air conditioner.
Right. The DRS, we've kind of beat that one to death. No more fastest lap. We've mentioned that in a previous episode. There's now a minimum time for development drivers of 2 free practice sessions per season. There is now a lower limit on how much testing can be done, or maybe just more strict limits, not necessarily less time. And then qualifying got a bit of an upgrade just for the times when, I don't know really if it comes from something that happened this past year or not, but basically if qualifying gets disrupted to the point that you can't really establish a starting grid, what comes to mind is like a wet qualifying session, then the stewards can elect to line the cars up in the order of the driver standings. And then some grid adjustments that were basically to keep, to fill the gaps when, a car falls out of contention between qualifying and the race start. That way you don't have the, where do I line up? Because I'm following the car behind me. So we can dive into those, but, or any of these, but which one stands out to you, Ruben? Like what?
Most of those I feel like have stories to tell from the 2024 season.
Sure.
I'm thinking about who is it that spun off during the Brazil Grand Prix? Well, it was Stroll, probably.
Well, one of many, but yeah, didn't both Alpine cars? Was it qualifying or was it the actual? No, because
it was the formation lap.
Yeah, exactly.
They were going on the formation lap. They spun out, and nobody knew how to line back up. And I think they penalized 3 or 4 drivers for anyway. I don't know. Obviously, like I said, I think the some of those that stand out, we've covered a little bit around the DRS changes. and those adjustments. I find so speaking of air conditioners and Hamilton being in interviews back when he did the Top Gear interviews, I remember him getting interviewed by the British, technically he's Irish, host Graham Norton, and somebody asking him why they couldn't have an air conditioner in the car, and he said it'd be too heavy.
Yeah,
like we don't have an air conditioner because it's too heavy. So I'm curious about that one. I assume they're introducing that because of driver safety.
Yeah. So there's a sort of a threshold of 30.5 degrees Celsius, which for all of us American / Yanks or whatever you want to call us, that's 87 degrees. So if the ambient temperature is 87 degrees, then there's an immediate trigger of this requirement for the minimum weight of the car to be another 5 kilos, 10, 11 pounds. And that would essentially disincentivize any team from not putting in or adding on the weight or the device necessary to cool the drivers. And I don't know if I'm assuming they're going to get super, high tech with it, but I'm thinking there's going to be some sort of plug-in and circulation of, cool fluid or cool air around the driver inside their suit or whatever. But yeah, so that's actually an impact on the minimum weight requirements, but that is triggered by, what's the temp outside.
That's a really interesting one to me. Only in the sense that it obviously won't be used much. I'm assuming Singapore, Miami.
Yeah, Singapore, Miami, sometimes Austin. Probably not Vegas. Probably just because of the time of the year and it's the desert. Sure. And I'm assuming it applies to any time the cars are on track, whether it's free practice, qualifying, or Grand Prix. But think about all the times when like those sessions are happening in those desert destinations. They typically have the race, at sundown, twilight, where it finishes in the dark and it's cooling off. But yeah, I think it'll come out a lot more than you think.
I mean that's fine. I'm curious how much that really matters. I know the drivers sweat a lot, and that's not great. And I've seen them in Singapore talking about how they've superheated to the point that they're vomiting in their helmets, which is just a delightful thought for any of us sitting at home in our comfortable chairs watching. But at the same time, that just seems like a minimal impact. And it also just, maybe this is already me wondering where the loopholes are like McLaren, but making me wonder, all right, how can I keep my minimum weight where I want it to be, by collecting condensation at the end of a round. So drop 5 kilos and stay low weight, and then crank that thing on and save.
Exactly, because a machine that cools air is going to be producing condensation, like it or not. So if you're not wicking that off, you go fast enough for it to just blast right off whatever surface it's coming on. But you're right, you could collect that. That's actually really interesting.
So that kind of makes me wonder who's going to try to take advantage of that, and also how you're effectively going to measure it. So are you going to actually measure the temperature of the driver's suit to ensure that cooling device is actually cooling them, or bringing their body temperature down? Is it going to come down to, can you keep your driver healthy, which seems like the whole point of this?
Yeah,
right?
That's a good question.
Driving and I'm cool, leave me alone, right?
Yeah.
I don't need your air conditioning.
How are you going to enforce it, right? Enforce like maybe they just add 5 kilos somewhere and they're like, yeah, and this is the cooling device. Like, does it actually work? How do you verify that? That's really interesting.
It's just like a fan.
Yeah. Well,
he's cool.
So nerd moment. The faster air moves, the cooler it is. There's like a pressure change and that kind of thing.
Sure.
So, and this is an aviation thing, but if a wing or a surface is passing through 50-degree air, the faster that wing passes through that air, the colder the temperature is on the surface of that wing, or the air at the surface. So therefore you can do things like freeze moisture in the air onto a surface, even though it's not freezing temps. So there's probably some really efficient ways to cool things inside the car because the car is going so fast. But I think that's going to be a big drag increase on the car, because like if you're catching more air than you have to, than you need to. But I'm really interested to see that there's bound to be a really clever way to do it at exactly 5 kilos, and kind of utilize
preferably a way that cools the front brakes on the way to
imagine that
to the driver.
Yeah,
wouldn't that be That's where we put our air intake for our air conditioner, was right by these brake ducts.
Yeah.
And what about you? I mean, that to me is interesting, just in the sense of I didn't honestly think F1 would add air conditioners. I kind of thought they'd say, this is the game.
Yeah.
You know, you can have a spacesuit if you want to add the weight, but it's
it's interesting that both of these things happen this year. One being the increase in the minimum driver weight. So you see the guys get out of the car and they immediately walk over to a scale. Like they're making sure that they are complying with, because I mean, you got a Lando Norris on the one hand, and you got a George Russell on the other. Supposedly this is to accommodate taller drivers, right? You can only get so skinny, but if you're taller, you're just gonna weigh more, period.
That was kind of you to leave Yuki Tsunoda out of that. Go ahead. You're like, you got Lando Norris, and he is the smallest one.
You're right. Yuki is the smallest one. But no, they increased the minimum driver weight 2 kilos, 4.4 pounds. I mean, it's sort of it's almost more of a gesture. But you know, back to your point about vomiting into the helmet, there were problems before the minimum driver weight requirement existed of drivers cutting weight like they would, like a wrestler would, or like a boxer would, just to be like, hey, you know, half a kilo can make a difference. And so they weren't feeding themselves correctly. They were putting their bodies through this really stressful event, and you know, you add into that the heat. You can see where the safety thing comes from, because for a long time drivers were, you know, driving through, you know, the effects of dehydration and the effects of starvation. So,
which makes sense. I wonder how close behind it. So that is a safety concern. And jokes aside, I would rather see driver safety than anything else in these rules. And honestly, driver safety, and allow other drivers, right? To your point, if you're 6'4", you're not racing in Formula One.
Yeah.
It's not happening. In fact, I have told one of my reserve drivers that odds of him ever being a driver is unlikely.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious, we've talked about, and there's no rule changes apparently to this effect, we've talked about how I would love to see the FIA say, we're going to increase the weight of the car, you know, by 2 kilos, and you must put 2 kilos of paint on the car. Stop showing up with these blank carbon fiber cars that no one wants to look at, where the primary color is carbon fiber.
Right.
Just put some paint on the car, and we will let you all have 2 kilos. You know, but
I like that. I like that. Like let's incentivize it being interesting. Things like that. I mean, think about, you've seen this kind of old news, but you've seen the panels, or the surface panels that McLaren has that change sponsors, right? So like during one event or one time of the event, it'll say one thing, and it's just like this little, like, super thin, you know, Amazon Kindle type panel that just, like, electric current does this one way and a different electric current does it the other way. So to me, like, that is like the difference between that and just paint is, it's not zero, right? So there's something there to be had. So, like, to your point, if you just said, look, the weight, we're just going to keep forcing you to make sure you do things by increasing the weight, it might add some elements like that where it could make it a little bit more interesting. I don't know.
Right. Anyway, I cut you off though. What's the rule change that's got your attention?
So I think that there's going to be, this sort of flies under the radar to me, but I think there's going to be some changes in the outcome of, you know, the World Drivers' Championship or the World Constructors' Championship, based on, like, if the sport continues to get more competitive, and this year, like we've talked about, it seems like the teams will be ever more competitive with each other at the top of the grid. I think that if a championship is decided by 10 points this year, you're going to be able to look back at a qualifying session where they couldn't finish it or whatever, and the steward said, hey, you know what, we're just, basically, you get the advantage if you're ahead in the Drivers' Championship, because that's how we're going to line up the grid. To me, that removes a little bit of the sporting aspect of it, right? Because that's what, those are the outlier events that make it sort of interesting, and you think, like, oh, is that the flap of the butterfly wing that caused all these other things to happen along the way, you know?
Right. Yeah. That one, so you said if they can't complete the qualifying round, which in theory would be because of really heavy rain,
Sure.
or 2 red flags or something like that,
Right.
and they've run out of time.
Right. But for whatever reason, like the finishing lineup isn't decided. Whether something happens in Q1 or Q3 or anything in between, the stewards can just say, you know what? Instead of having sort of this like uncertainty or whatever, it's just going to be this straightforward, before the weekend started, we were at this point in the points. This is who it is, 1 through 20.
So if for some reason some event interrupted one of these sessions, they would just sort of lock in the order.
Yeah.
And which seems very in line with what they've done in the past.
Well, and that ties into one of the other rule changes, which is this fastest lap going away. Supposedly, this is to incentivize the teams to just finish the race at the highest position possible instead of being like,
right.
Okay, you know what? I don't know.
I'm in 14th place.
Yeah.
I've got a 30-second gap to the 2 people who were behind me.
But to me, it's like, who cares where you finish the race? You're not awarding points 11 through 20. So why can't we award points there? Because you decide the grid lineup. If you don't finish qualifying, you decide the grid lineup based on driver standings. What about the bottom drivers? Let's say it's the second race in the season,
right?
And there's just half the grid that hasn't, like, everyone's tied for 11th, right?
Right.
So
right. I think, well, yeah, to your point, if you take away that incentive, then I know we're not, well, we are talking about the fastest point. That is a change. Yeah. If you take away that point, then 11th through, well, let's call it 12th or 13th through 20th, who have no realistic chance of catching up and getting any points, at least they could all pit and try to go for the fastest lap. It's a bad idea, but
remember,
now, if you were tied,
you don't get a point for fastest lap if you don't finish in the top 10. So really, it's to rob somebody in the top 10 if they have the fastest lap, is to like reduce the number of points they're getting, not necessarily increase the number of points you're getting. But again, we've talked about it in other episodes. I think that you should, if you get the fastest lap, you should get the point. There should be more things like that to gamify the each race.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, I'm gonna have to dig into some of those rules then, and some of those changes. And I think it would be a fun challenge to maybe challenge ourselves. We'll do some predictions for 2025. Which of those rules will teams come up with the most creative loophole to get an advantage with? Yeah. So, all right.
Anyway,
all right. Well, you want to do some quick reactions?
Yeah, let's do it. Before we do that, though, I just want to take a little credit for myself. I'm going to pat myself on the back. Verstappen publicly agreed with me with an opinion that I had in a previous episode.
Did he really?
Yeah. He agrees. And this was a quick reaction. Red Bull probably isn't in contention for either constructors or drivers championships.
Okay, I did not see that.
Did he really? He says if they don't take a major step forward this year in the development of their car, then they're probably not going to get either title. So, this is driver, pouting. This is driver, applying pressure and being political. But hey, at the same time, it's the opinion that I also had. So I feel pretty good about that.
You are at least as accurate as Verstappen is about that.
Well, I don't know if that's saying much, but yeah. So yeah,
I mean, that's 0.1 for Daniel on predictions for the season. It does seem like they're struggling, and you can't really see how they're going to make a massive step forward with Lawson stepping in. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, quick
I like
reactions.
Lawson. That's not a shot at Lawson.
No.
All right. Yeah. Well, let me run one by you. I'm curious. This is random off the cuff, but will Bono follow Hamilton to Ferrari? Did you see that Angela Cullen did? His old trainer.
Yeah, she was always in the shots. The camera went to her so much because the relationship between her and Lewis was strong. Lewis, I don't know if he's ever had a significant other. So there's almost like this void to be filled by somebody. So there's definitely a personal relationship or personal aspect to that relationship. So it's really cool to see her come back. I don't know yet why they parted ways. I don't know if, who knows?
She went to IndyCar. News says she went to IndyCar, but
right. But I mean, did she? Is that what she wanted to do?
Paid her.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they paid her to go to IndyCar. So the question is, there's this gravitational pull, as we already covered about Ferrari. Will Bono follow Hamilton across.
So I think Bono already got a promotion at Mercedes, and they had a you know, a tender farewell. I think wasn't Hamilton on the podium in the last.
Yeah,
in the
Bono
last
wore
race.
his cut-off blue jean jacket
Right,
and stuff.
right.
Great.
So I think professionally, you know, Bono will remain a little more pragmatic. I think he's probably going to enjoy a higher, you know, a better career development with the existing promotion that he's gotten at Mercedes, as opposed to just kind of following, you know, the star to a different team. Obviously, like there, you know, one doesn't disqualify the other. He could go to Ferrari at a higher, better paid position. But if he's going to Ferrari to be Hamilton's engineer, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much he cares about that relationship over his own career trajectory. So I would say no, Bono doesn't follow him.
Okay. And a quick follow-up. Who owns It's Hammer Time? Bono or Hamilton?
Ooh.
And can it be said in Italian?
I think, I mean, obviously it can be said in Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure it can. I don't know if it translates or not, but
yeah, you never know with Italian.
It feels like one of those where it would just be hammer time. Like it just comes across in an Italian accent.
Yeah, because who knows what hammer time even means? Like maybe there's a double meaning. These languages, you never know. I would say Hamilton is probably going to walk away with the rights to that, just because he's got a PR team, he's got a manager, he's got an agent. I don't know if Bono has any of these things, but hey, that's an interesting. You know, if I was Bono,
like what a shot if Bono says it's hammer time to like Antonelli.
Yeah. Or
Hamilton's like, excuse me.
Or cease and desist letter from Bono's attorney team. Or hey, I'll take a 1% royalty every time a piece of merchandise with hammer time is sold. Thank you very much.
Right. Yep. Nice. All right. So no to Bono. Bono is not heading over.
I don't think so. What do you think? All right. Do you think yes, no?
I think to your point, he's taken the money in the promotion. But given the way that this year went and all this Ferrari hype is happening, it wouldn't surprise me if suddenly we hear, and Bono's coming across too, because it's a lot of money and it's a really high profile position. But
yeah, and if you're a Formula One fan by default, you're a Ferrari fan, right?
Yeah, maybe we'll wait to see what Bono says about the Mercedes preseason testing.
Yeah. All right, so quick reaction for you, Ruben. Does Verstappen switch teams after this season?
Yes.
Cool.
I think so.
Cool. That's exciting to think about, if you ask me. I mean, whether it's $100 million for Aston or a lot of the talk around that has to do with, Mercedes kind of saying, like, we've always had our eye on him. We'd love to work with him one day, et cetera. And by Mercedes, I mean Toto Wolff, obviously. So, yeah. It's an exciting thing to think about, is Verstappen in a different color, different car, different everything.
Yeah. I think he does. I don't think he's stuck with Red Bull forever. He doesn't strike me as the sentimental type, and neither does his dad. And frankly, neither does Red Bull. So
yeah, true.
I think at some point, if they're not competitive, they're going to ask themselves why they want to pay for Verstappen, or whether they can keep paying for Verstappen.
Is it the right long-term strategy? And, Verstappen won. He's already said he's not going to have this long career like Hamilton or like Alonso. Number two, he had this Helmut Marko clause that gave him like a little bit of a relief valve. So it said in his contract, if Helmut Marko ever left Red Bull, that it would give automatically the option to Max to leave with, less penalty or no penalty. That actually was amended to not, like, I think at some point in 2024, that clause was removed. So what does that signal, right? Like, I don't think it necessarily signals more flexibility for Max or an easier way out, but I think we are also, sundowning his current agreement with Red Bull. So either way, he's always wanted to have that out, and any well-written contract that can favor a driver anyway should have some of those relief valves. Right. But yeah, those two.
It does start feeling like a really complicated board game. Like, I'm going to play my Helmut Marko left card, and I'm going to exercise my option to head out.
Yeah, but
I think I think he would leave if they don't perform. I'll amend my quick reaction. Yes, with a caveat of I think if they finish anywhere lower than second in the constructors championship, I don't think Verstappen's going to win the championship for the driver, and I think if they're lower than second again in the constructors, he'll move on because there are other teams who are outperforming them in a variety of ways. So, yep, that's my quick reaction for you.
Yeah, cool.
Let's see. I've got some other ones for you here. Actually, let's stick with that theme. Who takes the bigger step in 2025? Aston Martin or Williams? Williams picks up Sainz.
Mhm.
Actually, let me have your quick reaction. Who takes the bigger step in 2025? Aston Martin or Williams? As a team.
Right. I think Aston Martin. Does. I mean, I think we will start seeing those Adrian Newey changes materialize. And but it'll probably be like every third or fourth race. You'll see like, okay, oh wow, oh there's something clever happening here. They
bring a huge change over the summer.
Yeah, I don't see Williams deploying those kind of resources. And I just think in general, if you look at the numbers, that's what it takes, you know.
I mean, the truth is, Alonso is a bigger name to help bring the money in and turn a brand around than Sainz is. I like Sainz. I think he's great. He doesn't have that I want his T-shirt type name recognition, unfortunately. Keep in mind, Aston Martin was a distant fifth in the Constructors' Championship. Not even close, distant fifth. Long way to go.
Yeah.
Williams was ninth, but obviously, when you're down in that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th range, 20 points will jump you a spot or two.
Yeah, I mean, 0 to 10 is a better improvement than, 50 to 60 or whatever, if you think about number of points or whatever. Not that Williams was at 0 necessarily, but a lot closer to it than Aston Martin. So, yeah, I mean, maybe there is a little bit more impact coming from the driver. I mean, Alonso is always going to get the most out of whatever, the car can do.
Right.
There are two drivers on that team.
I mean, the reason I asked was there was a lot of Aston Martin hype this week. And then I started looking at the last year's Constructors' Championship and wondering who's going to move to make room for them.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's going to be McLaren, and I don't think it's going to be Ferrari. So you need Red Bull or Mercedes to slip a lot for Aston Martin to catch up to third. Second. Pick up. I can't speak today. To move from fifth to fourth is going to be a huge leap, and you've got to get one of the top four out of the way, which is a challenge. Anyway, all right.
So last quick reaction here for you. We've talked about, Verstappen doesn't think that Red Bull's going to be getting a title next year, either drivers or constructors. Let's just say that Mercedes isn't necessarily bringing their A game because there's regulation changes coming, and that's kind of, big constructors that are tied to an automotive manufacturer, whatever. So I'm going to whittle those two out of the top four. McLaren, Ferrari, who gets it next year? Constructors.
McLaren. I say that almost with disappointment. I don't know why. I think they're the easy pick. Or they seem to be the easy pick because they just seem to have so much momentum.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're going to slow down. We covered a lot with McLaren as well. I don't remember if we talked about they have a really nice wind tunnel and a really nice facility set up, and they're not spending a lot of their time focused on Hamilton joining the team. They just have two heads down drivers ready to go.
Yeah.
That's a lot to build on, but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't put money on this bet, but I'm gonna say McLaren. I don't think Ferrari just seems inconsistent to me. I know that maybe that's not fair, but Ferrari just seems a little inconsistent to me. McLaren has been slowly crawling their way better for a year and a half. And Ferrari just seems to come out strong and then falter and then show up weak and then all of a sudden be great. And it feels like McLaren right now is on the opposite trajectory to Red Bull. Red Bull, the reason why I'm concerned about Red Bull is they don't seem to be able to figure any of it out. They came out strong and then slowly declined. And I mean, you could say, oh, Verstappen sort of got it back in the last 5-6 races.
Yeah, but that was a function of hard resetting back to some like older developments, right? Or older versions.
Developments,
so.
And then frankly scrapping for it. I know Brazil, he kind of went off, but I don't think that's a fair comparison.
I agree with you on the momentum piece. If you think about the season last year, whether it was more a factor of Red Bull declining versus McLaren improving, McLaren was the one to catch Red Bull first, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, Ferrari was competitive or there, but they're the ones undergoing the change, like you're saying, on the driver's side, and they don't have the momentum or the success, you know, that McLaren had this past year. So I agree with that.
Yeah. And we'll see. I would love nothing else. It's all related, right? I would love nothing else to see Ferrari come out with the same strength they ended with, built up a little bit, and then Hamilton returning to a form nobody's seen him in for 5 years, or frankly more, 10 years, right? A little mad, a little feisty.
Chip on his shoulder.
That really works. Yeah. Found a car that really works for his style. I think everybody would love to see that. Maybe not everybody, but and that changes everything. If Hamilton comes out and suddenly Leclerc is looking like driver number 2, that's a totally different conversation for Ferrari than, okay, it's Hamilton in his waning years.
Yeah.
He's finishing 7th, 5th every now and then.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, good. I think that's it. Anything else we need to cover this week?
No, we got a lot to get through though. Between now and the first race, so
we have a ton to get through. I can't wait to get to the race season. But I think preseason testing will be fun. I didn't ask you about the London event. We got to talk about the London kickoff event at some point.
But. Are we going? I'm kidding.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Oh, we'll be. No, we're not going to be there, guys. Sorry.
The question is whether we'll learn anything there or not.
Yeah.
But all right, we'll cover that next time. Thank you for joining us on the Critical Lap. As always, please remember to subscribe, like, add a comment, add some feedback, add a question. Give your support to the Chiefs, whatever it is. But thanks for joining us on the Critical Lap, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. See ya.